Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another eMarketer Tech Talk, where we host amazing guests from all areas of media, ad tech, and martech. I'm Henry Powderly, VP of Content at Insider Intelligence. Today, we'll hear how ad content and post-click engagement can work together to accelerate sales. I'm joined now by our special guest, Jon Oberlander, Executive Vice President, Social at Tinuiti, and CEO of Ampush. Jon has a great presentation for you, and afterwards we'll open it up for questions about what you've learned. You can use the chat window to submit questions for the Q&A or to communicate with your peers. Now let's get started. Jon, over to you.
Thank you, Henry. I'm happy to be here and excited to talk to the group on this topic. As Henry mentioned, I lead social at Tinuiti and I'm the CEO of Ampush, and those things came together earlier this year when, after about a decade building a pretty unique performance marketing and growth marketing business at Ampush, we sold to Tinuiti and integrated the two companies. So more specifically today, we're going to talk about ways in which customer activation and combining what you're doing in your ads pre-click and with your landing pages and your funnel post-click might come together in unique ways. We're going to speak specifically about how we think about the funnel and how that might be different than what we've seen teams or other marketers do. We're going to introduce the metric APM, which is probably the most talked about metric at Ampush and now Tinuiti in terms of growth marketing and performance marketing. And then we'll go into some specific examples of how these things work together and come to life to drive unique results. So to go into that and start at the top, customer activation can be counterintuitive, specifically for the following reasons. I think one, we don't always see more traffic, which is where a lot of energy goes from marketers, translating to more sales. Often there are people or agencies, in-house marketers or agencies, very focused on generating more traffic or cheaper traffic to a site, and then it's someone else's job to take on the problem from there. One risk with that approach, which by the way isn't bad, finding ways to generate more traffic in general is worthy and part of the game in our minds. But you can end up with either lower quality traffic or traffic that's introduced to your product in ways that you are not then able to fulfill with the next step and leads to weaker conversion that erodes what you've done at the top of the funnel. In addition, a theme we're going to come back to a few times today is to not think about your funnel and the stages of the funnel in isolation, but to marry your approach to marketing and what you do in your ads and on your site to the journey a prospective customer is on when they see and click an ad and start engaging with your lower funnel. What I often see is marketers focusing on the top and the bottom of this funnel that we're showing on the screen now. Specifically, you've got a lot of folks thinking about audiences, creative, and making ads more relevant for folks at different stages of consideration or intent. Separately, you've got digital product or e-com managers, or maybe another team at an agency thinking about how to take the traffic that's coming to a site and drive better conversion, more purchases, more revenue from that traffic. And what I'll suggest is rewriting that a little bit and thinking about the fact that from a consumer side, they're introduced to your product with an ad. If they're engaged, they'll take that next step, click on your ad, and they will then get into an experience that is generated, if you're doing this really well, to match and fulfill the promise that's introduced in that ad. It's consistent, it's personalized to some degree, and then it introduces or removes friction points to address potential doubts or areas of excitement that consumer has. The way we measure this in simplest terms is with this metric I'll introduce here, APM. So APM is a combination of click-through and conversion rate. And it's basically looking at conversions per impression or acquisitions per impression and saying our goal is to drive more yield from the impressions we get in front of consumers. Yeah, the cost of those impressions may vary. There's other part of this equation, but if we're doing this really well, we're harvesting the demand we create in really exceptional ways. And to be more specific, APM, it's a metric of yield. You may think the goal is to just get more prospects to your site. But again, the big thing we're doing is trying to activate those customers. And by owning the landing page in the same place with the same team and the same group that's thinking about the introductory touch point for a prospective consumer, the ad, you can drive wildly differentiated results by using those two things in tandem. So one example in this site to conversion section, you add creative flexibility to what you can do because you also own the landing page. So if your landing page, instead of just being a generic buy flow, can be, for example, a piece of content or something interactive like a quiz, you can introduce that in your ad and change the shape of your funnel and get consumers expecting something exciting that might not otherwise be there. The big question we talk about answering for prospective customers is why now? In many cases, people either know about the products we're marketing or they at least know about the category. So the question is, why should I move forward now? Why should I make this purchase? Why should I sign up? Why should I register? And that is continually what we come back to in the activity we're talking about here. And then finally, we try to match our funnel shape to different levels of consumer intent. Some people, you're retargeting them. They've been to their site. They're ready to buy. In other cases, someone is just loosely aware of your potential product and how it might solve a problem they have, and they need more education. So as I mentioned, if you're thinking about click-through rate in a vacuum or just trying to increase that metric, that's not the whole story and has the potential to drive inversely valuable results for you. So here's the first example to set the stage and talk about APM. We work with a company called Bonafide that's a women's health supplement business that sells a number of different supplements, both in straight e-commerce and in subscription. And what you're looking at here is a 6-month span in which, after getting the right tracking in place, and by the way, the majority of this traffic was sourced from social sites like Meta and TikTok, we started introducing new post-click experiences and the ability to run new ads that match those post-click experiences, got consumers excited about one of their products, and then fulfilled that excitement with a PDP, a product detail page, that specifically matched what we introduced in the ad. What you see from this graph and the results here are that we were able to quadruple our conversion rate in this period, which is a pretty massive win, given this product's been in market for quite a few years and wasn't new. And because of that, we're able to generate more volume at an equal or more attractive price because of the compounding nature of these APM wins. As I mentioned, this doesn't think about the cost of that traffic, about CPMs. That will rise and fall based on platforms you're buying on, different times of year, seasonality, and competition. But if you continually are improving your APMs, you're going to get the maximum value out of the media impressions you generate. So now to break down these concepts we've introduced into a few buckets and give some examples. One, a powerful thing when you're introducing customers that might not be immediately ready to buy to your product, and you're trying to answer that question, why should they buy now, is to use interactive experiences. These are typically more engaging than a traditional buy flow, checkout flow, or something more rote. You can make them bespoke, and you can use them to highlight the unique value propositions of the products you're marketing and basically expand the funnel. When someone sees an ad that says, spin this wheel, or learn what matches, what type of content matches best for you, they're more apt to start down that path than if it just says buy this thing that you're not sure you want yet. Second category we'll get into are quizzes, which from my experience are typically used either for curation, narrowing, or matching a consumer to a specific product an advertiser has, or what we're going to talk about today, priming, using interactive experiences to generate higher APMs and educate and generate excitement in your prospective customer, subscriber, user about why to take this action now. And then the last category we're calling advertorial is really about education. Sometimes in order to buy a higher consideration product, someone needs to delve much deeper into what the product is, how it addresses their problems, the doubts they have about that product, and if those have or have not been addressed, and educate themselves in order to become comfortable. This is even more true as things like telemedicine are rising in popularity and moving online, and you're reaching a wider and wider set of consumers that may not be as digitally savvy or technical, and want to get more comfortable before making a purchase. So let's get into each of these categories individually. We'll start with interactive. The big goal in interactive pages is to engage your audience in a way that you couldn't do if you just had a static landing page. So in our first example here, we work with Starz, which is a premium cable and streaming network that's content includes both theatricals as well as original content, original TV series. And they compete with the likes of Hulu and Disney Plus and HBO Max. And their goal is to say, hey, why should someone become a Starz subscriber now? So one winning experiment that we ran was to introduce the idea in our ads when Starz is not running a sale. Because if someone's running a promotion, that answers the question, why now? Why buy now? Because it's cheaper. Okay, great, I'll try that. But if you're not running a sale, you need to use the non-price-based value props of the product to get someone excited and ready to convert. So we introduced this spin the wheel function that was differentiated and fun, but also allowed us to generate higher click-through rate because, again, people are more excited to spin a wheel than to just go subscribe for something they don't know about. And then it gave us a chance to highlight and personalize specific types of Starz content, whether that's an individual television show or a category, and get consumers excited about engaging with that. We used this interactive experience that expanded the top of the funnel and then fulfilled that promise by matching it with highlighting exciting new content. Results-wise, this drove a 60% higher conversion than a straight buy flow on what we're calling evergreen traffic. And it was not successful when Starz had what we're calling higher urgency offers, meaning they were running a sale. And by the way, the ability to separate and test different landing pages and different funnels based on what's in market, seasonality, time of year, other consumer opportunities, if you're not doing that, you're likely leaving something on the table. And if you want to outperform a highly competitive digital market, whether that's OTT streaming like we have here or other categories, you need to be doing that type of experimentation. Takeaways here. One, if you had a high urgency offer, you did not want to add these steps. But in times of offer fatigue, as soon as someone stops running an offer and people have seen those ads, they're like, oh man, I missed it. This is not the time to sign up. You need to give them another reason that is not just discount based to engage and really pull out the value props of the product. So that's what we did here in this case with Starz. Let's go to another example from the same advertiser. In this case, one of Starz' most popular new shows, it's called BMF. And a big reason, a big answer to the question, why now for a prospective consumer of a streaming service, is that they want to watch a new show they've heard about, they want to get into some new piece of content, or maybe it's a new season of something that existed. So in this case, we ran a test against a control group, and it was a smaller test because we didn't know if it would succeed at first, where we basically featured plot conflicts, trailer video, and gave users enough about this specific show to capitalize on volume that might be coming to Starz or might be more interested than otherwise because of the time-based nature of this show premiering. So again, you take a thing that exists, a value prop of the product, which in this case is a new show, and you say, why subscribe now? Because of this show. And let me highlight that in the ad by introducing you to this idea. And then let me also heat map my site so that if I want to match this approach in future, I can do so by realizing what elements of the landing page were most powerful. So in this case, we saw the majority of user clicks were on the top hero call to actions. Very few people even made it to the trailer. And so we realized that if we were going to do more around topical content and matching our advertising to tentpole events, we could spend most of our energy experimenting in this initial introduction to the content. So that's like the copy at the top, the hero imagery, and experiment heavily there. In this case, again, we saw a significant conversion rate win as compared to the initial test. And we saw an even greater APM win because we had the ability to feature this in more ads. All right, that's category one. And again, it's focused on something interactive. Let's go to the next category, which is quizzes. And quizzes are actually a subset of interactives, but from what I've seen, they're so prevalent in e-commerce and other digital revenue generation that they deserve their own category. Often quizzes are used for curation, meaning we've got 300 products. Let me help match you with ones that might be right for you. But in this case, we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about how they can reinforce value as someone's considering making a higher consideration purchase or making a big decision. The example we're going to use today is talking about Instacart, but thinking of them as an advertiser on the supply side. So many consumers know Instacart as a great way to get groceries on demand. But Instacart needs a steady, growing team of folks shopping and delivering those groceries in order to meet that consumer demand because they're a marketplace business. So when we are advertising to find new shoppers for Instacart in specific markets, what we found is building a consistency quiz that is an additional step, and this is where the counterintuitive point comes in. So it's an added step that didn't exist before that asks them questions like, what are you looking for in your next role? And giving this prompt, oh, I want to make extra cash. How much does someone agree with that? You're actually able to just reinforce that these value props of shopping for Instacart are available, and you get someone saying yes and moving toward excitement and positive conversion energy that, again, answers this question, why now? If someone's in this funnel, if they clicked on an ad shopping for Instacart, they've thought about taking on part-time work. Maybe they've thought about the gig economy, so to speak specifically. And so we're able to match Instacart's winning value propositions in that comparison to where that person is in consideration. This in particular drove a much higher conversion at the role selection step of the Instacart shopper sign-up funnel. Users who went through this flow were less likely to drop off between signing up online and getting into their app. And the specific reinforcement of, I want to make extra cash, that value prop, we tested many of these. That resonated the most with users. I want to make a positive impact on my community, resonated the least. So I'm not here to assign any sort of value judgments to what works. I think in specific, what we found out and what we learned from that is, hey, people going into this funnel, they're very focused on, is this going to be a thing that gives them substantial side income? And so by running experiments like this, you can improve your APM and conversion, and you can also learn things about your prospective customers, or in this case, your prospective shoppers, to bring into your ads and highlight in other parts of your marketing. I'm going to go one step further with Instacart. So once we saw this phenomenon that adding the step of a quiz that reinforced the value props of Instacart while engaging people and asking them questions was a winning approach. We then said, well, how can we even further improve upon this by looking at individual steps within that quiz? And what we found in this instance is that we were able to drive a 40% higher role selection conversion rate by tinkering with the start and end cards of our quiz and using what we'd learned about prospective shoppers to better match what we had in front of them. So again, picture someone gets an ad that says, want to shop for Instacart? Take this quiz and learn more. And initially, we were saying, see if you qualify in our early quiz steps. And at the end, we were using this Instacart specific lingo of being an in-store shopper. That didn't mean anything to anyone. And if anything, that took them like that confused them. That led to people thinking, okay, is that what I want to do? I thought this was about delivering groceries and I was going to benefit from this new bike I bought that would allow me to do this more quickly. So we ran a bunch of experiments. You can see this was V4. And in this case, we found that using a get paid focus in the start cart, if you remember from the prior example, the most compelling value prop in our quiz, the thing people most strongly agreed with is I want to make extra cash. So we brought that in here. And in the end card, we included a whole drop-down sign-up module that hit on some of the common questions, FAQs, and reinforced certain value props. This combo led to a big APM win in terms of generating more shopper interest and high-quality shopper leads further down the funnel. Really by tinkering with copy and using what we learned in prior experimentation and quizzes to make a smarter value prop. So those are our quiz examples. I want to get to our last category now because it might be the most counterintuitive. It sort of takes you from that remove any friction to buying mindset and actually brings you to, if your consumers don't have enough information, they're not going to be ready to generate revenue. So in this case, we're going to use an example from a telemedicine company that offers weight loss, both medication, as well as coaching and community support called Found. And initially, we were sending users to a typical sign-up subscription funnel. The experiment we ran, what we learned from the questions we were seeing in response to our ads from consumers or prospective customers was that they wanted to know more about medication, how it worked, what medications were available, and what they could expect. So you see a snippet of what we put on this education, medication-focused landing page, and we were able to improve conversion 10%, which, by the way, isn't as earth-shattering as some of the others, but it was noteworthy because this was a much less direct response-oriented introductory page. By introducing this module and giving users a step-by-step breakdown of the prescription process and letting them understand what was going to happen next. So this generated great scale beyond this initial experiment. And the big takeaways for here were, one, use good writers and think about your text, not just your visuals, to drive conversion optimization tests. And sometimes users want more information, not less, especially with complex, high consideration, or fear or anxiety inducing products. People really need to get comfortable with certain things before taking the leap. And so the more information and education they had, the more we nail their questions and their doubts, the more powerful this can be. Part two of this was, to some degree, going even further and saying, okay, initially we had this module-based approach talking about weight loss medication, but what if we actually run an experiment where we use long-form content? So almost like a blog that might not even be on their site, to allow prospective users to digest information about the program, compare it to other things, and increase their confidence post-quiz. These work best with high consideration products. If something is really cheap or free trial or easy to get involved with, you're probably gonna add friction to your process if you don't facilitate that for users and fulfill that promise in your ads. But in these cases, our ad said learn more, and it was reaching users that were in the consideration phase but weren't one step away from buying. So for them to think about why now, they actually first had to remove a lot of they had to demystify the process. So what did we actually do? One, we removed the menu bar from our landing pages to bring them into the content. We tested this long form advertorial content. And another thing we did was drawing inspiration from competitors in terms of like, what are other people talking about? And how does this specific weight loss product and coaching opportunity, how does that stand out in market? So again, this conversion rate win you see here is somewhat modest in its entirety. We're ending up around 8%. But if you stack these wins with better and better ads and you use the information you gain from them, that is how you end up with those APM wins that are not just 50% better, but are 2 or 3x and really unlock a whole new level of new customer velocity and growth. So to close this out, and I'll speak about this at a high level, and if people have more questions in the Q&A, we can get into it. How do you do this? The biggest thing I'd suggest for marketers is to not silo your marketing team and have one group thinking about ads and creative and a different team thinking about site and conversion. For a consumer, those two things work in concert, and I'd encourage you to bring them together also. 2, run a lot of experiments and try to win an APM win. Think about click-through rate and conversion rate together. Don't try to win those things in isolation. It's really easy to convert your traffic better if your ads are really boring and eliminate anyone at mild consideration. And it's really easy to generate higher click-through rate just by being sort of clickbaity and edgy. The real game here is to marry what you're putting in ads with what comes next and make the consumer journey more consistent and more fulfilling. And then finally, don't shy away from adding steps. Might not work. Not everything I showed in this deck will match for every product, but experiment there and don't sort of mentally legislate those things out, because as you saw here today, there are many cases in which counterintuitively adding a step will benefit you and drive unique performance. So that's what we got today, Henry. Let me pass it back to you.
Jon, thanks so much. Really great job. Really insightful stuff. I love that spirit of experimentation. This is a really refreshing perspective, really. There's so much focus on getting the click that sometimes marketers forget that there's a whole range of considerations that follow that engagement. And you laid out some really great examples. We do have quite a few questions, so I'm going to jump right into it.
Please.
All right. Question number 1. What infrastructure do you need to effectively engage customers post-click?
Yeah. The way we think about that and staff our teams, you want both graphic designers thinking about your ads and then UX designers working post-click and in the same meetings having the same conversation. And then on the media side, you want someone at the helm of optimizing media, and the role we use is called a growth marketing product manager. But think of it as like a digital product leader or someone captaining those experiments. And you want that pod ideally to be a singular team. But if not, you want them to have regular touch points. And I would encourage folks to work in sprints and run, depending on the traffic coming to your site, a certain number of experiments every 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's a great idea. And as a follow-up, how common are post-click engagement strategies being used? How do you assess the likelihood of success?
Yeah, I mean, again, we probably, if we take someone trying to acquire, I don't know, let's call it 10,000 new customers in a month, that usually gets us enough traffic that we can run 2 or 3 big swing experiments per month, and we'll have 2 sprints in there. So 1 big swing experiment per month. Think like an advertorial page instead of a traditional buy flow. And then we will run 3 or 4 smaller sort of tinkering type experiments underneath that. So we had that example where we changed the text on the start card, and we expanded the end card in the Instacart example, you might have 2 or 3 of those things running under the same cadence. If you got more traffic, you can test a lot more. If you're a younger business with sort of fewer advertisers to get fewer prospective customers to get a real read, you got to slow down the cadence of experimenting.
Nice. Now we have 2 questions that are kind of similar in the realm of what the team looks like. One question asks, how does the team look like to make this work, and what roles are needed? And another person asked, how can companies build non-siloed marketing teams? So maybe kind of talk through that structure and how do you build these units that are not operating in silos, but actually working together.
Yeah, we spoke a little bit to the first question. I spoke to it in that question around infrastructure. The only things I'd add, the way we do it, we have a captain leading that whole group. Typically, that's someone like director or VP level. And then you want your landing page, you want a machine fueling that experimentation. So we use both onshore and offshore designers to produce pages quickly, high quality, and then have like a QA machine to make sure the pages load properly with every browser and have the right analytics to measure that. If I was doing it in-house, the biggest risk to this is really when the person accountable for growth and customer acquisition is too siloed from the person accountable for the site and decisions and what happens there. And in the most extreme cases, it's like totally different parts of the organization. Like the site person, it might be more like product side or e-commerce, and it's really like marketing is existing in a total vacuum from that. Like that's a great way to not do what we described here. My biggest hack suggestion, and it's how we typically approach this, is to set up a subdomain on your site. So think like hello.whatever your company is.com, or you can choose, whatever lead in matches your product, and use that as a sandbox by which to run these experiments. So the e-com owner, they still have full control of the site. But if you're bringing traffic, whether it's from Meta, from Google, and you've introduced those customers, or the link they clicked is one that introduces a certain next step, like these quiz examples, then you can use that subdomain to build and test with different quizzes. I don't think that's profound. Also, you'd be surprised how often I still see these things in silos.
Oh, that's great. That's a great idea. All right, we have one last question. You've talked a lot about, things you've tried that have worked. What have you tested that hasn't worked?
Yeah, a lot. And, for this purpose, it's typically more valuable to have like a highlight reel. But again, we sort of don't prejudge ideas. And so we've tested like pretty far out on the fun interactive scale. We made like some sort of matching game once. We made like a speed magic eye game. Generally, we found whatever gains we got in click-through rate, we gave away because it had nothing to do with the product in those cases. If your product is a game, I bet that would work. The other stuff that can misfire is when you make a number of assumptions about why someone is, if you only have a heat map, and so you see they're like rage clicking something that you didn't actually make a hyperlink, and then you're like, wow, if I just enable that or improve the UX on this, that's going to open up a whole new world of conversion. We've seen that fail because what they're actually seeking is more information in many cases versus just like an easy way to bypass a step. So yeah, I mean, if folks are interested, like happy offline to go into more on that, but those are 2 big categories that we've seen big losses. And by the way, you learn as much from a big loss as a big win, because again, it gives you this like very specific information about your customers.
100%. Well, Jon, that's all we've got today. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us. We really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks a lot, Henry. Happy
Okay.
to do it.
So before we wrap up, let me take a moment to tell you what's happening across eMarketer's media channels. You can register for upcoming live analyst and tech talk webinars at emarketer.com/webinars. On the audio side, don't forget to tune into Behind the Numbers, eMarketer's daily podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. And finally, please subscribe to our newsletters. Keep an eye on your email for the link to today's recording and for the slides. Once again, thank you all for your time. Thanks again to Jon and the team at Tinuiti, to our Studio II crew, the eMarketer production team behind the scenes for making this webinar possible. We'll see you on the next Tech Talk.